Hello everyone, I'm Vishal Salsekar and today we are going to cover the News Today articles for 11th of December. So in today's discussion, we are going to cover four important articles in detail, which includes the first article regarding the Diwali's recognition as the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage. So whenever there is a specific designation of anything, whether it is let's say Garba or any other type of thing in at any specific place, for example, let's say the intangible cultural heritage, the tendency of UPSC to ask the question about that increases, and that's why there may be chances that UPSC can ask about this. So that's why it is an important article. Next is regarding the World Inequality Report of 2026. So as highlighted by this particular report, that the inequality is rising, right? When we talk about the world and compare it with India also, at both the places the inequality is rising. So this report gives you a lot of data regarding what are the specific facets of the inequality and in what all parameters we can observe the inequality, so you can substantiate your arguments with the data provided by this particular report. Next is regarding the India's record high nuclear power generation. So as per the NPCIL's generation of the units from the nuclear energy, this has been the highest generation of the nuclear energy, and that's why this is a significant breakthrough. And along with that, when the government is focusing a lot on the alternative sources of energy which are less carbon intensive, and that's why the aspects like this is very important. Last is regarding the parenting in the AI age. So we already know that it is a double-edged sword. So whether there are certain kind of like help from the side of artificial intelligence in different fields, and there are certain type of issues also. So in that particular manner, it is important to understand that the every field, which is including even the parenting field, is getting impacted by AI. So we are going to see the analysis that what are the changes that are being observed in context of parenting through the artificial intelligence. Then in today's personality news section, we are going to talk about the personality of C Rajagopalachari, a prominent freedom fighter from the southern part of the country. And then there are certain other quick updates that we are going to discuss about. So let's start the discussion with the very first article regarding the Deepavali's inscription in the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage of humanity. When we talk about this particular designation in the intangible cultural heritage, so that means it is already going to be important from the perspective of GS paper 1, which is the Indian heritage and culture. So it is having a direct correlation with that, and along with that, GS paper to international relation, because whenever there is any talk about any of the major international organization, the chances are very high that there may be question asked regarding this. That's why this is a very important article. Now whenever there is any festivities that is there in news like Deepavali for this particular reason, so even a basic question based upon that particular festivities can be asked. Like in 2024, the question was asked regarding which among the following has been recently inscribed by the UNESCO. At that point of time it was Garba, now it is Deepavali, right? So the context of this particular article is that the 20th session, which was the intergovernmental committee in Red Fort that had held for the first time in India, and in this particular summit or the session, there was a designation of Deepavali as the intangible cultural heritage, right? So India has now 16 elements that are part of this particular list. So it is a major and the significant breakthrough for India, because Diwali is being celebrated almost across the entire country, and that's why inscription of Deepavali in the intangible cultural heritage is a significant breakthrough. Now talking about Deepavali, specific things, even basic aspects about the celebration or festivities that can be asked by the UPSC or the state PCS examination. So on which particular day? On the Kartik Amavasya, either fall on in the month of October or November. So basically this particular festival is the symbol of prosperity, renewal and the abundance of the individuals. Even certain places there is the harvesting of the crops. At certain other places it is basically being celebrated as the means to ensure the prosperity, right? So these are the significance. Now regarding the festivity celebration, so it is roughly 5 days of celebration that is being celebrated across India. When we talk about the celebration, so the first day is celebrated as the Dhanateras, right? So which is for the prosperity. Then next is the Narak Chaturdashi, which is the symbolization of that we are going from the darkness to the lightning. So that's why we lit the diyas, right? And then the third day, which is the sacred Lakshmi Ganesh Pujan, right? So this is the auspicious day of Diwali on this particular day of Kartik Amavasya. Then on the next day followed by this is generally the Govardhan Puja at different parts of the country. At certain parts it is also celebrated as the Padwa, and last is the Bhai Dooj. So this is a 5 days celebration that is being celebrated almost entirely in the country. Now talking about that why it is being celebrated, so there are a lot of legends that are associated with this, but one of the most prominent one is the legend mentioned in the Ramayana, that after conquering Lanka, after the defeat, after defeating Ravan, when Sri Ram came back to India, so in that particular place the entire city had celebrated this particular festivity by lighting the diyas, and that's why this particular celebration is being done. So this is the legend associated with Ramayana. And then when we talk about Mahabharata, because sometime it is also related with the Mahabharata also, because from the Vanvas and the Agyatavas of the Pandav, when the Pandav came back again to Hastinapur, so that's why on that particular day when they came back from the exile, this was also the Kartik Amavasya, and that's why it is also sometime associated with the Mahabharata. But the most prevalent one is the legend mentioned in Ramayana, right? So this is regarding the festivities of Deepavali. Now talking about that, what is exactly the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage? So this is particularly the list that is being managed by the UNESCO as far as the intangible cultural heritage are concerned. So there are tangible cultural heritage. For example, there may be national parks, there may be certain sacred sites, there may be certain monuments, but then there are certain intangible culture which you cannot see, but you can sense, that you can observe those particular things, whether it is festivity, whether it is any dance performance, whether it is music, whether it is any other folk art, right? So all these things are part of that. So this is basically adopted in the 17th October 2003 in the UNESCO's 32nd General Conference. Not that much important fact, but just for the sake of giving, it has been provided. Now the next is regarding safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage. Now what all things are that? So it is referring to the practices, representations and the expressions along with the knowledge transmitted over the generations within the community. So celebration of festivities also comes like this. So since the earlier generations were celebrating, we are also continuing this particular legacy, right? Now talking about that convention includes what all things? It includes the oral traditions or the oral aspects. For example, let's say there are certain type of sacred text which are the shrutis, which are not maybe generally seen, but they are generally heard or they are generally felt, right? Apart from that, there are traditions, expressions, then there are performing arts. For example, let's say martial arts, there are different other type of theatrical performance, right? Then the social practices, then there are rituals, festivals. So for example, the Garba, for example, there is Deepavali, Navroz, right? Then the knowledge and the practices concerning the nature, for example, yoga is there, and the universe, and the traditional craftsmanship. So all these type of things are part of the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage. Now the General Assembly of the State Party is the body which is a sovereign body that meets in every 2 years, and then they decide that which particular art form or which particular aspect has to be provided part in this particular list. Now, what is the responsibility of the state? Because suppose karo, if you are designating, let's say Mahakumbh, or let's say yoga, or let's say Navroz, or let's say Diwali, so it is now the responsibility of the state party in order to safeguard that particular intangible cultural heritage, and the prime responsibility falls on the state, not like the convention is holding the primary responsibility. Now these are the entries from the side of India in the UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage. Now how the question is generally being asked, just have an observation regarding this. They will give you 4 pointers that yes, this is part of that, this is part of that, and then basically based upon that you have to identify that whether the things mentioned are part of this particular list or not. So the most initial inclusion from the side of India is the Kutiyattam, which is the Kerala's Sanskrit theatre, then the traditional chanting of the Veda, and then along with that Ram Leela. Next year there was inclusion of Ramman, which is the festivities celebrated in the Garhwal Himalaya. Then there was Chow dance in 2010. There is Kalbelia from the Rajasthan region. There is Mudiyattu, again a traditional folk theatre from the Kerala region. Then in 2012 there was a Buddhist chanting of the Ladakh, again certain type of spiritual aspect, certain type of festivities, right? Then in 2013 Sankirtana from the Manipur, and 2014 it was the traditional brass and the copper craft of the Punjab, right? Now Apart from that, there were, after 2016, there have been multiple other inclusion. For example, 2016 mein it was Yoga and the Navroz. Then 2017 mein it was Kumbh Mela. Then 2021 mein it was Durga Puja, which is celebrated in Kolkata. 23 mein it was Garba, and 25 mein it is now Deepavali. So this is like total list of the 16 things from the side of India that are being included in this particular list. So now just have an idea about this so that you will be able to at least eliminate if there is any prelims based question regarding this. Now see, as I have already talked about, that the prelims based question are also being asked, and the means based question like safeguarding of the Indian art heritage is the need of the moment discussed. So here you can mention about these particular initiative, for example the intangible cultural heritage list, and that is going to help you with respect to fetching comparatively better marks. The next article that we are going to talk about is the World Inequality Report of 2026. Now, when we talk about the term inequality, already we know that the society and the social justice also comes into play, and even the economic situation comes into play, right? And that's why it is relevant for GS1, GS2, GS3, all the type of papers, it can be part of that. Now, talking about the inequality, now there are already multiple reports that talks about different aspects of inequality. Now in that case, which particular data is relevant for you? See, in any specific question, UPSC will not mention that as per this report you have to write the answer. So that means the liberty is at your end, that whatever data that you are having, if you are not having any data, you can note down this particular data and you can utilize it as the authentic data in order to quote this from the examination perspective, from that particular context perspective. So data authentic hona chahiye, data should be there if that is the question that demands certain type of data, and that data gives the weightage to your answer. But it's not like that you have to quote only this report's data. That's why you have to understand the broader trend. Now when we talk about the inequality, we know that because of a lot of things, because of the rise of capitalism to some extent, because of a lot of situations that the private industries are increasing, so there is a rise of inequality. But then in that particular case, this inequality is also leading to certain issues in the specific countries. For example, inequality is not impacting all the country at the same pace. Inequality is more impacting the countries of the global south as compared to the countries of the global north. Means developed country ke comparison mein developing countries ko it is impacting more. Now, when we talk about the key findings, so this is the third report in this series. So 2018 mein report tha, 22 mein report tha, and now this is in 2025. Who is publishing this report? There are independent 200 panelists. Along with that, there is World Inequality Lab, जिनके साथ वो panelists associated, and they are identifying the trends, and based upon that, the report is being published. Now, what are the important aspects or the features that are mentioned by this particular report? So this report talks about certain things. For example, first it takes the criteria of wealth. So in the context of wealth, it talks about that the concentration of wealth is also skewed towards certain rich individual. For example, the top 1% in the countries in general, this is the world's data. So top 1% controls roughly 37% of wealth. That means lagbhag jo top 1% strata hai, that is controlling the 37% of the world's resources, and top 10% have 75% of the resources. That means this is the level of inequality ki bhai if you see that there are 1,000 people, then only 10 people possess roughly 37% of resources, and then remaining 990 people are having only the remaining resources. When we talk about 10%, तो यहाँ पर majority से भी ज़्यादा 3/4 of the resources are being controlled by them. Now when it comes to India, top 1% holds roughly 40% and top 10% holds roughly 65% of the wealth. So when we talk about at the national level and the international level, the inequality is to some extent, if we take this 10% bracket, ये यहाँ पर इंडिया में comparatively कम है. But that does not mean that the scenario is fruitful, right? It is going to create certain difficulty in the longer term. Now when we talk about the income concentration, because this is the wealth, this includes all the things, the properties and all, but when we talk about the income, top 10% earns 53% of the global income. देखो वेल्थ में इट वो 75, बट इन टर्म्स ऑफ इनकम इट इज 53%. दैट मींस जनरेशनल वेल्थ भी होता है, और देयर आर मेनी अदर थिंग्स. In the context of India, top 1% earns roughly 23% of the income, and 10% earns roughly 58% of income. That means again an inequality related scenario that is being observed. Next, when we talk about the wealth growth, how the wealth is increasing. So this is there, this wealth is there जो कि concentration है. It also includes the historical factor. It also includes certain kind of present day exclusion. Income is the present day income that we are talking about, but this wealth growth, how in future that is increasing, because the trend is being talked about over here. So it is mentioning that since 1990 the wealth of the billionaires has grown. मतलब जो those who were billionaires, their wealth had grown, and it is twice as compared to the bottom half of the population. So the bottom half है उसके comparison में double rate से it has increased. Means on the one side the poverty is increasing, on the other side the number of billionaires are also increasing, right? Next is the climate inequality. So they are talking about कि भाई देखो, there are already climate issues and everyone knows about that, but who is creating that? In that context it is mentioning that the carbon emission that is being done mainly by those who are at the top strata. For example, 10% top most people are emitting roughly 77% of carbon. That means obviously not their individual contribution, but the way the wealth they are controlling, that wealth, basically the industries, maybe certain other type of offices, all of them are emitting the carbon emission, and the poorest half jo hai, that is only contributing 3%. So you can see 97% has been emitted by top 50% and poorest half is roughly 3%. This is the level of inequality. When we talk about top 10%, it is 77%, right? Next in this is regarding the structural imbalance. So it is mentioned that, see, in the global north and global south. Now global north countries, we can say developed countries. Global south countries, the developing countries. Now who need loan more? It is the global south countries, right? Because they are having comparatively poor structures available. They are in the need for the things, for example, for the food security, for example, for fuel, for example, education, health, for a lot of things, they need the funds. How those funds are coming? Funds are coming from the global north countries, generally from the developed countries. Now funds, technological transfer, all of these things are coming from the global north. Now in that particular case, they have to repay. So the global south is going to repay. So the global south is repaying for that whatever debt they had taken from the north. Now in that case, this report is talking about that is structural imbalance jo hai, that each year roughly global south jo hai, that is transferring more than 1% of the world's GDP to the global north. Now why? Why? Because that is through the debt service. Means whatever debt they had taken, there is a need to ensure the servicing of that particular debt. Means आपको interest देना पड़ेगा. You have to do the profit repatriation. Suppose करो north से one company establishes its firms in the southern country, for example, let's say in India or maybe any other country of global south. Then the profit that particular company is earning, that profit also will be sent to their home country, right? And the financial flow. Suppose करो today they have got certain profit, and tomorrow if they want to move their funds to any other country, they can do that. So all these situations are causing the impact on the countries of global south. Now this report also gives an idea regarding what may be the policy recommendation there. So क्या solutions हो सकते हैं in order to resolve the situation in this particular scenario? So the first it is talking about is the progressive taxation and the tax justice. That means there should be certain measures that can be incorporated which ensures a certain basic minimum tax on the super rich people. For example, let's say if you are earning more than 500 crore, you have to give certain portion of your income to certain sections which are vulnerable. That is because obviously you are earning this much at the cost of certain people, and that there is a social cost also associated with that. Social responsibility is also associated with that, right? So the global minimum tax on the billionaires and the international anti-evasion coordination. For example, suppose karo a country's person who is earning in this country, now that country asks for the money. Now that person, what he or she does, that person establishes another firm in another country jahan par tax rate kam hai, and then they are trying to route the money in between that, and eventually the government is getting loss. In that case, there should be the international collaboration for the anti-evasion, and that's what is the need of the time. Next is regarding the public investment, that talks about that the government should spend on this. For example, high quality education, healthcare, child care, nutrition. What will happen with this? Suppose karo, if a person is poor, that particular person might not be able to deal with these things, basic things, education, healthcare, childcare. Now suppose karo, if the government is not providing any type of funding, the subsequent generations are also going to face the similar problem. Now if you have to resolve the situation of inequality, you have to support to some extent more to those people who are not able to afford, and that's why the education, healthcare, childcare, nutrition are very, very important. That should be spent upon. Next is the redistribution related programs or redistributive programs. For example, there may be the cash transfers, there may be certain type of, let's say, the universal basic income type of things, there may be pensions, there may be underemployment related benefit or unemployment benefits, right? So suppose karo, if there is no employment available, and right now you can observe that right now, because of the artificial intelligence, a lot of industries are going to face this crisis, and that's why the government will have to come with these particular type of initiatives in order to ensure the stability in the society. Next is the gender equality measures. Now see, if you are depriving the half of your working age population in order to not enter into the workforce, then inequality तो वहां पर 50% तो हो ही गया, right? So in that case, the gender equality measures also has to be very important step in order to prevent the inequality related situation. So provide the affordable child care, the paternal leave, enforcing the equal pay, protection against the discrimination, all these things has to be there. Even the glass ceiling what is created, that has to be broken in order to prevent any type of discrimination. Clear? So all these things has to be very important. Next is regarding the climate policy focused on the ownership. So there should be the climate related subsidy. Suppose karo, if you are exploiting the environment a lot, that means you have to pay certain amount of that will go to the government, and that should be subsidizing the other people at whose cost that particular environment is getting damaged. So the climate subsidies with the progressive taxes and the green investment by the public sector instead of the private. So the green investment has to be promoted. Lastly, the international financial reform. So whether it is the global currency, whether it is the centralized credit system, whether it is the taxes which are the surplus taxes, तो ये कुछ चीजें हैं which is ensuring that if the wealth is getting concentrated at certain end, that should be redistributed, that should be flowing towards those places जो कि deprived हैं, right? So there should be financial reform, and that's why even with respect to IMF, that is being talked about, that those countries which are more in the need of funds, which are the developing countries, not the developed countries, but the developed countries ka quota is more, that means they can draw more money from IMF. But this is the irony of IMF, right? And that's why these situation has to be dealt properly. Next article is regarding the India's nuclear power generation, which reaches the record high in the financial year 2024-2025. Now talking about this, the relation of this article, again GS paper 3, completely relevant, science and tech, in that the alternative source of the energy, renewable energy, then there is a nuclear energy, right? Apart from that, GS paper 1 geography, because it also talks about certain aspects of the resources. You can also relate it with the governance and all, right? So now talking about the context, so recently what had happened, that as per the Department of the Atomic Energies ka data, that NPCIL, which is the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, that has crossed 50 billion units generation of electricity because of the nuclear power, and that is for this financial year of 2024-25. That means this is the highest ever or the record breaking generation of the units by the DAE. Now when this is the one of the highest generation or the highest generation, now this is going to help in order to provide the availability of the alternative sources of energy. That means now nuclear energy ka share बढ़ रहा है, and when the nuclear energy share is getting increased, that will directly impact the carbon emission, because the carbon emission are going to now cut, and there is observation that 49 million tons of less carbon dioxide that has been emitted. So this is an observation that if the alternative sources of energy are going to get increased, this carbon emission is also going to reduce. Now talking about the nuclear power in India, when we talk about the nuclear power, one thing I would recommend you, that go to the map and identify which all places there are nuclear reactors that are being established, which are the main nuclear powerhouse in India. Talking about the India ka plan jo hai with respect to the nuclear energy, India is following the 3-stage nuclear program, where at the first stage we are having the pressurized heavy water reactor, then at the second stage we are having the fast breeder reactor, at the third stage it is the advanced heavy water reactor or the advanced reactor, which is utilizing the thorium comparatively more, and that's how we will be able to utilize our own indigenous resources. We'll discuss this in later term. Next is regarding the 3% of the total energy right now is being generated through the nuclear energy. So that is also a significant milestone, and the target which we have kept is roughly 100 gigawatt of the nuclear energy capacity by 2047, the time period when we are going to celebrate the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Now next we have to talk about the 3-stage nuclear plan of India. Now you can see over here that the first stage is the pressurized heavy water reactor. Now in this particular stage, this is a pressurized heavy water reactor. Now the fuel is going to be the natural uranium, and in this particular uranium, this is going to give the output in the form of the plutonium and the depleted uranium. Now this particular plutonium, depleted uranium, and along with that obviously the electricity is getting generated. Now when these are being fed in the plutonium based reactor, which is a fast breeder reactor, and here this plutonium, along with that there is the conversion of thorium, and that particular thorium is going to be converted into U-233. So TH-232 is going to convert it into U-233, and then that is being fed over here. So यहाँ पर जो fast breeder reactor, that fast breeder reactor is going to generate electricity also, and along with that it is going to generate more amount of plutonium. So the intake of plutonium is comparatively lesser, the output is going to be increased, and this is going to be the self-sufficient process. This is right now at the experimental stage, and then the last stage is where there is going to be the stage 3, जहां पर thorium and the uranium fuels will be utilized, and this particular thorium and the uranium fuel, when this will be utilized, it will be U-233 fueled reactors, and this is going to generate the large amount of electricity, and then that is going to utilize even the thorium at the large scale. Okay, India is having the large resources of thorium, and that's why we want to utilize this type of application in order to utilize our own indigenous resources, right? So this is basically the 3-stage nuclear program. Now talking about the initiatives that India has run for the nuclear related energy generation or the nuclear supplies, so there are multiple initiatives that India has done. For example, there is a nuclear energy mission. So yahan par in the budget of 2025-26, it has focused upon the research and development of the small modular reactor. Recently, when there was India and Russia annual summit that was there between the Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, there was also the deal regarding the small modular reactor. So these small modular reactor are comparatively compact, comparatively small in size, and that can be developed in the modular manner. Means these different components can taken and then they can assemble. They are comparatively mobile, they are comparatively small, and that's why they are more agile. So small modular reactor advanced nuclear reactor capacity of up to roughly 300 megawatt per unit. Then developing the Bharat small reactor. So again another small reactor. So the government is right now focusing upon developing the smaller reactors, which can be developed at the smaller places. Otherwise for the reactor you will need the large place, right? And smaller reactors may there are no much danger also associated with the emission or the leak, right? So 220 megawatt pressurized heavy water reactor with the proven safety and the performance record. This is the Bharat small reactor. So this is the heavy water cooled and the heavy water moderated natural uranium based reactor. So it is the conventional pressurized heavy water reactor, but at a compact size. Now talking about the key achievement. So the key achievement is basically that we are able to increase the production of the energy from the nuclear resources. Along with that, we are able to establish certain more number of reactors. So for example, first 2 units of the indigenous 700 megawatt energy pressurized heavy water reactor at the Kakrapar, Gujarat. So this is one of the prominent location jahan par there is a nuclear reactor. Along with that, the launch of the Mahi Banswara in the Rajasthan, and this particular Rajasthan atomic power project, right? Apart from that, the Rawat Bhata atomic power project. So these are certain locations jahan par conventionally there was nuclear reactor, but now there are small modular reactor and certain indigenous units that are being operated, and that's why it is very important, right? Now, talking about the PYQs, with the growing energy needs, should India keep on expanding its nuclear energy program? Discuss the facts and fear associated with the nuclear energy. Again, the first part can be addressed through this particular answer, and discuss the facts and the fears associated with that. So previously also we have discussed about the nuclear energy. The pros with respect to that, the carbon emission is going to get reduced. Along with that, it is an alternative source, so we will be less reliant upon the conventional sources. Along with that, there are many probabilities and the possibilities with the nuclear, but along with that, because we are having the thorium reserves, but along with that the issues are also there. The radiation leak may be an issue, right? Whatever we have seen in the Chernobyl. So these particular issues are there, that's why there may be certain fears also associated with this. Now the last article in the major articles discussion is regarding the OpenAI CEO Sam Altman underlines the AI's growing role in the parenting. Now, previously we have talked about the AI's role in governance. Before that, we have talked about the AI's role in different domain. So this is also one such domain where the AI is going to impact its role, right? You might have heard of certain statements. For example, the people are utilizing artificial intelligence in order to accept certain confessions. They are like talking that they are talking to the human, right? So all these things are there, and that's why in each and everyone's private sphere also the AI is now getting the inclusion, or it is interfering, right? So now whether it is good or whether it is bad, then that is up to the future generation, that has to be seen. But right now we can analyze only, right? So from the perspective of GS paper 1 society, GS paper 2 governance and social justice, this is a very important article because it gives you the probabilities and the possibilities that what artificial intelligence can do in general in the later time period. Now, talking about the benefits of artificial intelligence in parenting. Now, what all things the parenting generally is requiring is basically, first thing is, let's say there may be 3 or 4 children of a person, right? Now, generally what happens with the parenting, there is a standard operating procedure. One shoe fit for all approach is being utilized, but not all the children are of the same competence, same type of learning capabilities, right? So they might need certain type of different approaches with respect to the cognitive abilities or otherwise, right? So that's why the AI ka utilization is going to enhance the cognitive skills by utilizing the personalized education. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, किसी को बोलने से समझ आता है, किसी को सुनने से समझ आता है, किसी को देखने से समझ आता है, राइट? सो ऑल दीज थिंग्स कैन बी फेड अप एंड देन दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग कैन बी यूटिलाइज्ड इन ऑर्डर टू टीच. So AI powered toys, right, like the Cosmo, which is going to guide you with respect to the differential model of learning. Even the government is now introducing from the 3rd class onwards the AI in the curriculum. That means now the government has also accepted that the AI is going to be the future of tomorrow, right? Next is reducing the parental burden. So generally क्या होता है कि there are certain creative aspects that the parent have to chalk down, and those things are also as per the social things. For example, if the society is changing, those kind of things are also getting changed. For example, previously there used to be the cuddling, now there is mobile phone. Now in future, what we know is exactly not available, right? So that's why the artificial intelligence can help the parents with these particular creative aspects, helping the parenting responsibility alongside the household work. So it will be reducing the work of the parents in order to get them engaged with the AI ka assistance. Then the child's monitoring. So there are certain experiments and there are certain products also available in the market. For example, Cubo AI is there, which is like having its a camera which can be placed near the child that can monitor even the breathing pattern, even the sleeping pattern, even other patterns, and that will be making the parents aware regarding this. So these are the benefits. Obviously, no doubt that has to be adapted. If there is anything good with respect to any technology, that has to be adapted. But then there are certain risks are also associated. For example, first is the erosion of critical thinking. Now just assume a scenario that there were like snakes were also used to previously had the legs, but then those particular legs were not being utilized and gradually those got disappeared. What I'm trying to tell you over here, that if the cognitive abilities or the critical thinking is not being utilized over a period of time, that will also reduce, and that is going to impact the subsequent generations and their thinking capabilities, and specifically the critical thinking. So it can create the dependency on AI, so you will not be able to think even without the AI's assistance, and that will be giving you the algorithm based or a type of like algorithm based understanding of things. For example, when you scroll the Instagram, when you doom scroll the Instagram or the YouTube shorts, what you able to observe is whatever you are liking in that particular type of trend, that type of videos are appearing to you. So that can create a thought filter bubble, and that will be the reality that is shown to you. So this is the main problem. Next is the social isolation. If you are too much integrated with AI, you might be leading up closing your external bonds. So the physical bonds, face-to-face bonds are going to get deteriorated, right? And that may potentially impact the emotional regulation, empathy. All these things are going to get impacted. Next is the privacy concerns. Now suppose karo, if the policy is not drafted properly, if you are utilizing the tools like let's say Cubo AI, if that is infringing upon your privacy, and there are very high chances that if it is doing that, then what may be the recourse? So poorly designed, regulated, misused, hacked AI system that can cause a lot of privacy concerns, right? Lastly, the algorithmic biases and the misinformation. Now, AI does not work without data. There has to be the structured data that has to be fed in the AI systems or the AI LLMs, and based upon that only you will be getting the responses. Now suppose karo, if that is available generally with the Western data, there is going to be the Western biases, right? So there is always a bias with respect to data. Generally, ऐसा नहीं होता कि it is neutral. So if it is having algorithmic biases, if it is having certain misinformation, that will be transmitted to the children and that will be accepted as the reality, and that is going to deteriorate the entire situation, undervaluing the critical approaches. Though those are all are the things which are the risk associated. Then what should be done? See, there has to be proper assessment of the things before we jump out to any conclusion. It's not bad. In a long term, we have to adapt that the technology is aiding us, but at the same time making sure that we are overly relying on this particular technological help or technological tools may paralyze us with respect to our critical thinking, our cognitive abilities, right? And that's why the technological aid should be utilized even for parenting, but along with that there should be the physical world or the social world that has to be inculcated in order to ensure the holistic development of a child. Now, having discussed about this article, now let's talk about the personality in news. And today's personality in news is C. Rajagopalachari, who is also known as popularly Rajaji. So Chakravarti Rajagopalachari or C. Rajagopalachari, the time period is 1878 to 1972. Right. Now, a prominent freedom fighter associated with the non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, and along with other Gandhian movements, right? So he was born in Tamil Nadu, Thorapalli region, right? He was a renowned lawyer, then the social reformer and able administrator. Along with that, he quit his legal profession and joined the nationalist movement. Then he worked along with Gandhiji, Rowlatt Satyagraha, non-cooperation movement, CDM, Vycom Satyagraha, everywhere he had performed. Even from Tiruchirappalli to Vedaranyam, like he also participated in the CDM movement. So Vedaranyam March was under his leadership. Now talking about that post-independence contribution, so he was only one and only Governor General who was the Indian, and that too after independence. So the one and only Governor General of India till 1950. He was the CM of Tamil Nadu from 1950 to 54. He was also the former founder of the Swatantra Party. He got the Bharat Ratna. His key writing includes the Ramayana's interpretation or understanding in the form of the Chakravarti Thirumagan. Right. So it was written in Tamil, which is the interpretation of Ramayana. Now the value he reflects, obviously patriotism, integrity, dignity. So prominent personality associated with his firm views. Along with that, whenever he wanted to have his own different opinion on a lot of things, he had shown his different opinion or the differences of opinion with the even Congress leadership. So this is regarding the personality of the Chakravarti Rajagopalachari. Having discussed about him, now let's discuss certain other quick updates. First in this is regarding the yellow line. So a few days back we have seen the news regarding that there is a ceasefire as per the Trump plan that has been imposed when the Israel and the Gaza related war that was going on, Israel-Hamas war, and that was mainly being fought at the Gaza, right? Now the Gaza strip mein, that there is a division now that is being proposed by the Israeli military chiefs, and they have said to draw a yellow line. What this yellow line says, ki bhai Gaza is going to be divided, western side of Gaza is going to be the part of the Palestine and the eastern part of Gaza is going to be the part of Israel. So this is going to be the new border between the Israel and Palestine. Now, this is a conflict because as per the peace plan, जो entire Gaza strip है, that had to be the part of Palestine, but then this is being said as the invasion by the Palestine, right? So yellow line marks the zone which Israeli forces have withdrawn under 2025 US-backed ceasefire. Now, the divides Gaza into two parts, Israeli-controlled eastern areas and the Palestinian-administered western areas, right? Next is regarding the Great Barrier Reef. So it is basically the coral reefs, or we can say the largest coral reefs of the world at one place available, right? So it is at the coast of Australia. So the study has found that the 3/4 of Goniopora colonies, which are the colorful coral related colonies at the site of the Great Barrier Reefs, were wiped out due to the extreme heat stress and the rare coral disease. So generally the threat that the coral reefs are facing because of the climate change, because the temperature is rising, and that's what is creating the stress in the corals, and that particular stress is leading to the even the coral bleaching related phenomena. Now where this Great Barrier Reef is situated, it is at the coast of Queensland, Australia, in the Coral Sea. Now talking about that, it is basically the world's largest collection of the coral reef. There are more than 400 type of coral, 1500 type of fish species, because the corals are providing food to a lot of fish and the other sea animals. 4000 types of the mollusk that are available. Now species such as dugong, which is also known as sea cow, India maybe Tamil Nadu coast ke around it is found. The large green turtle, these are also available. Now finally, UNESCO has also designated this as the World Heritage Site. Now in the first article where we have talked about Diwali, that is the intangible cultural heritage. Now this is the tangible one, so it is the World Heritage Site. Next is regarding the National Hub for the Quantum Communication. So the IIT Madras has inaugurated the India's National Hub for Quantum Communication at its campus under the National Quantum Mission. So what is this National Hub for Quantum Communication? It is basically to accelerate the capabilities in order to withhold its quantum computing mission firm. For example, there may be a lot of intervention from different countries side, and that's why we have to safeguard our quantum space. So it is to accelerate the national capabilities in the quantum mechanics to secure communication, thereby safeguarding the India's digital infrastructure against the potential threats from the other countries which are also working in the same direction. It focuses on the quantum key distribution, which is the exchange of the secret encrypted keys, right? Apart from that, post quantum security, quantum memory and the repeaters, then the satellite based quantum communication. So in order to prevent any kind of interference by any other country, these things or these particular infrastructure related to quantum computing has to be secured. Now it drives the co-development program, large scale test beds, means the test related pilot projects and even the deep tech related startup supports that is being provided through the National Hub for Quantum Communication. Next is regarding the GLOW-Cas9. So it is the, just we have seen the CRISPR-Cas9. So this is the change version of that, which is GLOW-Cas9. So Indian scientists have developed the GLOW-Cas9, which is the CRISPR protein that glows while performing the gene editing. So where you are going to cut, that particular place is glowing. So that will be able to comparatively better identification of the place and all. So it allows the monitoring of the CRISPR operations in the living cell tissues without harming them. So this particular जो ये glow है, why it glows? Because of the bioluminescent version of Cas9, which is by fusing the Cas9 with the enzyme which is derived from the deep sea shrimp protein. So this bioluminescence come from the shrimp protein, deep sea shrimp protein, and that's what is being associated with the Cas9, which is a molecular scissor. Where you have to cut the strand, that particular place is being, that particular thing is being done by the molecular scissor. So Cas9 enzyme acts as a pair of the molecular scissor to cut the strand of DNA, and then this CRISPR-Cas9 is the process jahan pe you are identifying, you are cutting, you are replacing, and then you are altering this particular sequence of gene editing. Next is regarding the contempt of court. So recently Supreme Court had observed that the power to punish for the criminal contempt is not a personal armor for the judges to stifle the criticism. मतलब ऐसा नहीं कि if somebody is criticizing, maybe you are not working upon something and that's why there is a criticism, and in the wake of criticism you are putting the contempt of court, which is being allowed as the exception, not the key daily basis pe you should do the contempt proceeding. So it is the authority to punish, but then it is also the power to forgive. मतलब ऐसा नहीं कि you have to just punish, you have to also forgive sometimes. Now what all type of contempts are available? So 1971 का contempt of court जो act है, that particular act provides two type of contempt of court. One is the civil, another is the criminal. Civil is like willful disobedience, means court has issued certain order and you are not accepting that order. This is the willful disobedience, means you know that you are disobeying and still you are doing. Criminal contempt is when you are not obeying, that's fine, but along with that you are demeaning something, you are going against that particular thing, and you are lowering the court's authority, interfering in the proceedings. All these things are lowering the authority of the court, and that's what is the criminal contempt. Now under Article 129, when the Supreme Court is acting as a court of record, that also provides it power to punish for any violation. Similarly, 215 is for the High Court. So Article 129 and 215 are the articles related to the contempt of court. Next is regarding the Asian Development Bank. So Asian Development Bank has recently raised the India's growth forecast from 6.5% to 7.2%. Now this is the good thing, obviously, that this is highlighting that India is growing, right? So in that particular context, we have to have an idea regarding where this particular ADB is situated, what is the objective, and also it is the Asian Development Bank. That means primary focus is Asia Pacific region, but then other regions are also at this focus. Headquarters is in Manila, Philippines. It was founded in 1966, a multilateral development bank. So right now, जैसे आप देखते हो ब्रिक्स का एनडीबी या फिर एशियन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक. सो लाइक दिस द प्रीवियसली देयर वाज मेनली द एशियन डेवलपमेंट बैंक दैट वाज द प्राइमरी बैंक. नाउ इट इज अ मल्टीलेटरल डेवलपमेंट बैंक दैट इज सपोर्टिंग द सस्टेनेबल, inclusive and the resilient growth across the Asia Pacific region. Now the countries include 69 members, including 50 from the Asia Pacific. India is obviously also a member, one of the largest shareholders. So the 5 largest shareholders include jointly the Japan and Australia, the largest shareholders, then the China 6.4 and India 6.3% of the shareholder. Australia is 5.8%. So this is regarding the ADB. Now, whenever there is any bank that is there in news, you should have a brief idea about that. Next is regarding the Delhi Ridge. So the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change reconstituted the Delhi Ridge Management Board with the statutory power. So what is basically Delhi Ridge? So Delhi Ridge is basically the area of the Aravalis which is situated in Delhi, and this is the dry deciduous forest land at the hearts of Delhi. So this is the extension of Aravali. Now Aravali itself is 1500 million years ago. इतना पुराना mountains है, obviously there are going to be certain depletion that will be observed. Along with that, yes, this is a dry deciduous forest. Now it is spread over roughly 8,000 hectare. Now it is divided into 4 zones. Northern ridge is there, southern ridge is there, central ridge and the south central ridge. This particular Aravali का जो ridge है और range है, that is available. Now it protects Delhi against the hot winds of the Rajasthan desert because this ridge is acting as a natural barrier. It is nicknamed as the lungs of Delhi, home to more than 100 avian species, right? So this is regarding the Delhi ridge. Now the last article is regarding Rambha LP. So we know that the Chandrayaan 3 went to moon, right? And once it landed to the south polar region, near the south polar region, there is Rambha LP, which is the radio anatomy of moon bound hypersensitive ionosphere and the atmosphere Langmuir probe, right? So this is basically observing that the surface or the near surface atmosphere kaisa hai, right? So what it has observed? It has observed that there is an active plasma environment that is available. So what is plasma basically? So the plasma is electrically neutral and generally also known as the fourth state of matter, solid, liquid, gas ke alawa there is plasma state. So it is a mixture of the charged particles including the ions and the free electrons. So there is the plasma that is being observed near surface. Now what is the objective of this Rambha LP? So it uses a hypersensitive Langmuir probe which is mounted on a boom on a type of stick that is mounted in order to avoid the lander's interference so that it can observe clearly that what is basically at the near surface region. So it measures the electron density, electron temperature in the near surface plasma environment around the moon's south pole जहां पर ये भेजा गया है. So this is regarding the Rambha LP. Now the UPSC generally will not ask too much technical question, but generally one liner type of question that can be asked. It is associated with which particular mission, right? So like this it can ask. Now with this we have completed the discussion of the News Today articles for the 11th of December. Now at this point of time there must be certain question on your screen. Try to solve them. Also whatever questions I have discussed, try to write down those particular answers, try to solve them in order to get better clarity and better application, right? So thank you very much. We'll meet again in certain other discussion. Thank you.